In this Controller 102 video, I'll go over a mechanic called double ticking. This trick was discovered by Deadpool 5241 and players in his circle some years back. Pot optimization was Shady Milkman's contribution, and anything else mentioned about pot execution is my own input. It's what I learned and discovered myself before any of this became public, because I used both number crunching and practical use in game to find out what works. Power healing isn't exactly the same as health healing. Giving power through the power over time mechanic is actually pretty limited, considering every 5 seconds you deliver a power tick for 25 seconds for just one cast of pot. That's why the instant power heals like defibrillator and recharge, for example, were created, so that you could give additional power aside from pot's limited capabilities. Of course, that has limits too. The double ticking trick just allows you to give an extra pot tick 5 seconds sooner before the pot cycle actually expires. You have your single pot tick, which is what you constantly see when power over time is active, and then you have your double pot tick. The double tick occurs when you cast your pot power after the 20th second. That's if you decide to go by time. What you can do is use a timer like a stopwatch with a beep, or the loop countdown website that was recommended in my Controller 101 video. You can also use shields like Distract, Grandeur, Time Bubble, or anything else with a 20-second cooldown. Experiment and find things in game if you have to. Just cast your pot power and quickly hit these powers in the form of a clip to keep them synced. When the cooldown is up on the shields or whatever it is that you're using, cast your pot power again and clip with that shield again. You treat them as one. That is what allows this trick to work. This is extremely helpful for new players, but I don't recommend you rely on it forever. These shields become very valuable when needing to survive, revive, and complete objectives, so use them just to practice. Remember, this isn't a talent. You aren't immediately born with the ability to double tick automatically like a machine. That comes from constant and consistent practice. That is essentially how you acquire a skill, through non-stop practice. As time goes by, if you're persistent and committed, you will develop an internal clock. You'll be able to sense when 20 seconds has gone by and will no longer need outside tools to help you double tick. So stay determined and practice. Some players perform better through visuals, and that's where this next method becomes useful. Cast your pot power when you see the 5th blue pot number. Here we count the double tick as tick number 1. If you count the double tick as tick number 0, then it will be every 4th tick that you cast pot. It depends which one is easier for you to keep count with. Some people have preferences towards even numbers, and some have them towards odd numbers. Despite it being well known that the 20th second provides a double tick, the double tick mechanic itself is not based on time. In other words, it isn't based on 20 consecutive seconds, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all the way up to 20. The double tick is based on the appearance of the blue pot tick numbers. This leads to Shady Milkman's work on pot optimization. In short, when you see the blue pot numbers, you could cast your pot power every time you see those blue numbers, and you won't delay your pot tick or interfere with the double tick. You can cast your pot every blue number, or every other blue number, which leads to my next tip. You can cast your power over time every odd number when you see the pot ticks, if you're counting your double tick as tick number 1. So that's tick 1, 3, and 5 is when you hit pot. Or to simplify, every other blue number is when you hit pot. What you're essentially doing is, while pot is already active, you're hitting your pot with, that's the key word, with the blue numbers, so you aren't delaying the next tick. Because pot is based on the appearance of the 5th number, in the way that we're counting the double tick as tick number 1 and pulsing pot, you're more likely to double tick, and you will double tick if you do it correctly. But in order for this to work, you have to know your base pot tick number, as well as your pot tick number when you're buffed by a compound soda, a Vite soda, and all your trinkets. Once you know them all, and you see them on the screen, you won't get confused. This method actually requires awareness, so it will be more of a challenge for most players. Basically, keep your pot power synced with your blue pot tick numbers on the screen. This is something that I've always emphasized, especially when you revive teammates or have them come into line of sight. If your criticism is that you'll be wasting power, my counter to that is that I have cast pot in this way for years, and I've never remained on empty. The reason for that is because of trinket cycling, sodas, and most importantly, weapon combo power regen, which is something that controllers on entry level always struggle with. Another tip is to develop a rotation. Maybe you're in the habit of casting pot, then a debuff or an instant power heal, and then weapon mastery into brawling into Shuriken Storm. You can fit 2.5 brawling weapon mastery combos in a 5-second window. You can also fit a pot or debuff cast, then clip with your instant power heal, and finish with 2 brawling mastery combos. That will fit in a 5-second pot tick span, which is easier to manage in a rotation. All non-channeling power animations have a duration of exactly 1 second. Clip them with something like recharge, and you can fit 2 powers in 1 second. Then, ideally, do your brawling combos. Just get an idea of how long it takes you to perform it, and how many of those rotations you have to execute to reach 20 seconds. I do recommend you break the rotation into 1 or 2 pot intervals, or 5 or 10 seconds rotations, because it's easier to start up or break up the rotation during content if things go crazy, or if you just have to perform other duties. So you also need to know that between second number 20 and 25, as well as blue pot tick number 5 and 6, is when you have a 5-second window to hit pot anytime in between and still get credit for a double tick. Ideally, you want to cast pot on the 20th second or on the 5th pot tick, because you want to get power out in chunks as soon as possible. So you double tick, then clip with your instant power heal, buff with a Vite trinket if available, and you become a more efficient and effective blue bar healer. Power over time hits all 8 members. You need to remember that. So when you have 2 consecutive pot ticks on top of each other, hitting all 8 members, and an instant power heal going to the 3 least powered members, you can see how one would aspire to master this trick. You'd give so much power. I want to mention another trick too, and that's called triple ticking. A triple tick does exist, but it's difficult to execute because it requires both controllers be in sync with each other. It's also a little trickier to use now because of updates that were done to how controlling works. I do want to emphasize that it is something that you'll more likely excel with if you have the same triple tick partner, because at that point you've been running together and you kind of get the vibe for each other. You know what to expect from each other, essentially. So the way triple ticking works is you treat it as if you were double ticking, but you have a 1-second window to cast pot with the other controller. That's important. You have to both cast pot at the same time. Both of you need to cast it on the 20th second or on the 5th blue pot number. That's the only time you can get the triple tick. The same tips above work to achieve the triple tick, as well as both controllers informing each other of when to throw pot. And you could come up with a lingo or some kind of key phrases as to let you know when it's going to come up and when to hit it then. It's not impossible to do, but you just need extreme focus. However, you don't really need to do this in content anymore unless you run with a group that just spams a lot of power, and I mean really a lot of power, and everyone in the group has to spam a lot of power in order for you to actually need to do this. I haven't used this in about a year, or close to a year, and that's mostly due, maybe a little bit over, that's mostly due to power regen from advanced mechanics and far more outside power healing tools. But above all of this, almost nobody runs with another controller, therefore there's no need to really triple tick, especially if you can handle it as a controller, as one troll powering a team. This isn't something that you have to do in content. I'm only informing you of it so that you know it exists. If you do pursue it, I recommend that you find someone that you have chemistry with, and that's like controller powering chemistry, blue bar healing chemistry. There must be chemistry in order for you to successfully pull this off. If you're actually curious about using the triple tick and you don't have or don't want a partner, you can still perform this in game. What you have to do is you have to run elite raids and alerts, get all the elite gear, and then get the power strategist mod, which I'll get into in a little bit. And with all 8 pieces and that mod active, you'll trigger the triple tick. You just treat it as if you were doing a normal double tick, and then of course 20 seconds or the 5th pot number, you will cast your pot, and what will happen is you'll activate the Elite Affinity PoT at the same time you activate your innate, the actual pot itself, and you'll do the triple tick. Using this will also allow you to do a quadruple tick, which I'll briefly show now in slow motion. As to whether or not it's intended, I'm going to get into that and probably ask a developer, but until then, because of the way the Elite Affinity works in general, and with the pot mechanics itself, it's not clear as to whether one is supposed to overwrite the other. So if it turns out that it is a bug or whatever, I'll just remove it, and I'll just redo this part of the video. Lastly, if you struggle with double ticking or just keeping pot up in general, there is an elite mod that will allow you not to have to carry your pot power at all. With this mod active, any power from your tray will start power over time, and when the 19th second hits, or the 5th blue pot number appears, it will automatically double tick for you as long as you cast any power. And that's a supercharge, a shield, defib, your instant power heal, basically a debuff, or just your pot power, but it will register as part of the affinity. All you need to do is meet the requirements and have any and all 8 pieces of elite controller gear. You need to get 25 marks of victory and purchase the Power Strategist mod. You can attain the mod from your base R&D vendor or from the console vendor in the tech wing near the big window. The console is in front of Dr. DeSanto. There also have been some issues with this mod and players who have just been revived or come into line of sight. Basically what they have to do is wait until the 19th second pot affinity cycle refreshes. To overcome this, with them playing with no pot, basically you just have power supercharges ready, supply drops, buffed Vite trinkets on your instant power heals, especially for healers or tanks. And what I usually do is I deal instant power heals until I see their power bar move with my next pot tick, or with the affinity tick, while watching to make sure that they also get the blue pot tick number over their head. So you could either do both or just one of them depending on what's going on. In general, keeping an eye out on blue bars and power bars while you cast pot is a good indicator as to who has power over time active.